Goals are really important for any business, for any individual, for any person. Otherwise, how do you know where you're going to go? You're probably not going to go anywhere. You're just going to spin in circles, or you're going to go to your desk every day and you're going to think you're doing some work and you're going to think you're being productive, but you're really not necessarily going anywhere. You're maybe just putting out fires. And I think it's really important for record labels. And if you're an independent artist, you're managing your own career as if it were a record label. The same applies to you. But I think it's important for record labels to kind of set their sights on something. And hopefully you're watching this close to the end of the year or close to the start of the year, or maybe the start of your year. Maybe that's fall, or maybe that's the start of the summer. I don't know. But I think it's a good opportunity to stop for a second and say, we should create some goals. Now, whatever those goals are, that's totally up to you. But I want to help you today understand why goals are important and how to create goals that are achievable and attainable for you as a record label. Let's dive in. First, a shout out to my friends at Infinite Catalog for sponsoring today's episode. A big thank you to them. They've been a huge supporter of other record labels and the whole indie record label community since day one. So I really appreciate what they do for our community. And what they actually do is manage our royalties. They have an incredible platform for managing all of your income and revenue streams that your record label receives, calculating it, sorting it, processing it, and keeping everybody up to date with their finances, and making sure the artists get paid, the number one most important thing. Go to infinitecatalog.com to learn more. And if you go to infinitecatalog.com/other record labels, you'll get a discount from us. Why are goals for your record label important? Well, goals are motivating. I think goals help us focus. Goals are like guardrails, so we don't spend time filling our day with just being busy, but not really accomplishing anything at all. I think they give us clarity. There are a lot of opportunities, and Steve Jobs, I think, was the one who said that success is found in what you say no to as opposed to what you say yes to. And I think goals really help us focus on that one yes and ignore all those other little no's. We're going to talk about this a little bit later on, but I think it's also really important that when you're creating goals, that you think of the multiple categories that you can create your goals in. For record labels, there's various categories. I mean, for some of you, it might be charitable goals. It's that you want to do something charitable for your artists or for your local music community. Maybe it's a personal goal of starting a record label was a childhood dream and you finally want to make it happen. For a lot of us, it's financial goals that we want to make a certain amount a month, or we want to make a certain amount in the coming year. There could be some big lofty goals that I want my record label revenue to replace my day job or half of my day job. You could say that I want to work with 2 new artists a year or 1 new artist a quarter. That's 4 a year. Maybe a release every single month, or a release every single quarter, or maybe just your first release. These multiple categories, in fact, are important, and I would suggest you do a goal in each one of the categories I mentioned, or create your own categories. More goals leads to more success, more accomplishments, more things getting done. So how do you create these record label goals? That's what I want to help you with today. Do you got a notepad ready? I want you to write some things down. As I was preparing for this episode, I was talking to someone and they let me know about this framework called the SMART framework for creating goals. And it was something I wasn't aware of. In fact, I was creating my own framework that was not as clever as this one. So SMART stands for SMART, which is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Specific goals are really important because it doesn't allow us to get away with saying something broad and somewhat confusing, like, I want to make more money next year, or I want to release more music, or I want my record label to be more popular next year. That's not specific. You really want to ask yourself the who, what, why, when, how. The more specific you are, I actually think the more successful you're going to be with these goals. It creates this open-ended problem for our subconscious brains. If I tell my brain that I want to make more money next year, my brain's just going to nod along and go, yeah, that sounds like fun. But if I tell my brain I want to make $100 a week at my record label, then my brain starts to go, okay, that's a really simple number. $100 a week, that's like maybe $15 a day. I think we could do that. The M stands for measurable. Goals should be quantifiable so that they can be tracked, and it gives us something concrete that we can check in on. The example before, I talked about something specific, like the concept of instead of making more money, I want to make $10,000 for the year. So now we need to make sure this goal is measurable. Instead of saying I want to make $10,000 for the next year, now you should say, I need to make $833 a month for an entire year, or $27 a day. It's great that we're really specific, but we need to make sure that we can stay specific by being able to measure our progress. The A stands for achievable. Are these goals something that your record label can actually do? Is it within your power? I mean, don't get me wrong, it's good to aim high. It's good to have lofty goals. I kind of do as well. I sort of believe in manifesting, but don't tell anyone I said that. But when you pick this goal, you need to kind of reverse engineer it to make sure it's actually attainable. It's something that you can literally do within the time frame, we'll talk about that in a second, that you've given yourself. Let's go back to that $10,000 a year goal, which is a great goal, by the way. $10,000 a year is $192 a week. I think that's achievable. That's going to require a lot of work, but I think it's achievable. Now, what if you said, I want to make more money? Okay, be more specific. Okay, I want to make $100,000 this year. Well, that's about $1,900 and $1,920 a week. Whoa, that's pretty tough. Like, that's really tough, especially if you're just getting started. So I would kind of coach you and say $100,000 in your first year or even second year or even third year might not be attainable. So this goal needs to be actually possible. The R stands for relevant. What does that mean? Well, these goals that you create, are they actually relevant to your mission statement, to the reason why you wanted to start a record label in the first place? Did you want to share great music with the world? Do you want to make sure that artists that you believe in, that you love, are being supported, are making a living? What is your reason for existence? Let's hold these goals up against that reason. Does it make sense? Are these goals relevant to your objective, your main macro objective? For example, is making $10,000 a year going to contribute to your overall objective? If you're looking to replace your part-time salary or your full-time salary, that maybe is contributing to that. But what if it's just about being more charitable? If it's about growing your local music community, if it's about growing a genre that you think people aren't paying attention to, maybe this small goal isn't really relevant to that bigger goal. There's a lot of goals based in vanity too that we see. Things like social media followers or YouTube subscribers. Not bad goals. Those are goals I've had myself. But why? Maybe you're starting a YouTube channel and your goal is 1,000 subscribers in the first year. Well, that's a great goal because then it gets you to being monetized. And monetized means that the more videos you post, the more money you can make. And money enables you to do things like press vinyl for the records that you believe in or invest money into your artists. And so that subscriber count actually leads to your main objective, which is supporting artists and making sure artists get heard. And finally, the T stands for time bound, which is the timeline that you give yourself to accomplish this goal. Goals should have some sort of expiry date. Otherwise, we procrastinate. We're going to procrastinate even if we have a deadline, but at least deadlines start to eat away at us a little bit. It creates a sense of urgency. Now, timelines have to be big enough and long enough to make sure that the goal is attainable, that the goal is possible. Like, I want to lose 20 pounds in the next 6 months. That's totally doable. But I can't lose 20 pounds by the weekend. That's not doable. So this time limit that you give yourself has to be realistic. But at the same time, it has to be broken down into smaller, digestible time chunks, something that helps our monkey brains know what we should be doing. If you just say, I want to make $10,000 in the next year, that doesn't tell you what you should be doing on January 1st. It doesn't tell you what you should be doing on February 1st. It just tells you that by December 31st of the following year, you should have $10,000 more dollars. That's great, but it's not specific enough, and we need to break it down into some more digestible chunks. Finally, how do we actually achieve these goals? What is the plan of action now? Like I was alluding to before in the timeline, I think the best way to achieve your goals is to break them down into smaller goals. Let's use an example that is less quantifiable. Not everybody is going to have financial goals or how many releases per year you want to do. Some goals might be a little bit more lofty, a little bit more intangible. So let's use the example of saying, I want to have one of our releases appear on somebody's year-end best album list. Okay. So let's say you're listening to this in the first week of January. And just a couple weeks ago in December, all those music publications that you follow were presenting their top 50 or top 100 albums of the year. And your record label didn't have any releases that were listed on those lists. I know the feeling. So we're going to make it our goal for this year, come next December. So we've got 12 months to appear on one of those lists. Let's take that goal and put it up against that SMART framework, the SMART framework. Is it specific? Well, yeah, I want to have one of our releases, at least one, appear on at least one music blog's year-end chart. That's very specific. Is it measurable? Of course it is. At the end of the year, either our album is on someone's list or it's not. Is it achievable? Of course. It's a little bit out of our control, but it certainly can happen to record labels like us. Is it relevant? Oh, this gets a little tricky, but I think we want to make sure, I think it would be a representation that that album was heard by the press and by music fans, and that artist is being honored, and it's kind of a pat on the back. So yeah, it's relevant. And is it possible within the time frame? Does it have a time frame? Yeah, we're giving ourselves 12 months. We have until the end of the year when people start making their year-end lists. I think that's pretty good. If that's something you wanted to do in November and people have already started making their lists, or the lists are complete, that's not possible. But if we start this objective in January, yeah, it's possible. Okay, so we've just put this goal through this SMART framework and it's checked all the boxes. So now what? This is where the deer in the headlights moment happens, right? It's like, well, I don't know. Well, break this massive objective up into smaller pieces. Okay, so let's figure out, do we have some releases happening this year? Yep, I think we have 4 releases happening throughout the course of the year. Okay, so that gives us 4 chances. When are we going to release these albums so that they get a chance to be considered by these blogs? Well, if we release all our records in November, December, that's not going to happen. If we release our records in January, they might forget about them by then. So maybe we're going to do some spring, summer, fall releases. Which blogs do you think you have the best chance of attracting? Let's make a list of all the music blogs and curators and magazines that we think may like our releases. Let's campaign early to these specific blogs. Let's send them a pre-release. Maybe let's bribe them by sending them a test pressing or letting them in on some of the details of the new release. Let's get them kind of invested in the record from the early days so that they feel like they're an early adopter to this band or this new release. And let's create a marketing campaign, a promotion campaign for the end of the year, so that when it's a couple months out from when people start making these lists, we can start reminding these blogs and letting them know about that release. Hey, remember that release you heard in May? We want you to consider it, explicitly ask them to consider it to be included on their year-end list. So there, we have a goal that's super specific for our record label to have at least one release on anybody's year-end list 12 months from now. It's attainable, it's specific, it's measurable, it's relevant to our mission statement, and it has a deadline. We've broken up that goal into smaller little tasks that we know what we should be doing throughout the year, like releasing enough records to give us multiple chances, releasing them at good times of the year, promoting them to the blogs that we think will like them, reminding those blogs at the end of the year. And guess what? You can have multiple goals in multiple different categories that we talked about at the beginning of this episode. Have multiple goals with different timelines. Have yearly goals like the one we just mentioned, or have quarterly goals or monthly goals, maybe even small little goals for the end of this week or the end of this month. We talked about a lot today. I hope you found it encouraging. If you listened to this or you watched this at the start of the year, hopefully it kind of lights a fire under you and you take some time to write some goals down. If you've been taking notes during this episode, then God bless you. I'm sure most people don't take notes. And that's why I'm going to put everything I talked about today on my website at otherrecordlabels.com/goals. So go to otherrecordlabels.com/goals, where you can kind of meditate on this and hopefully create some goals that help push your record label forward. And remember, trust some of the day-to-day stuff to the pros so that you can focus on the big picture goals of your record label. So give your royalties to our friends at Infinite Catalog to manage, because they're the best and everybody in our community loves them and uses them. So go to infinitecatalog.com. And if you want a discount for getting started and some other cool things, go to infinitecatalog.com/otherrecordlabels. Thanks for watching.